Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk some metal. I've been talking a lot of metal in the past 24 hours. The time I'm recording this, Marty and I just did a heavy metallurgy episode last night with Dennis, talking about albums that pummel you. So I was up till about, I think we finished up around midnight. By the time, we chat for a few minutes afterwards, I shut stuff down. It was about 1 o'clock by the time I got in bed. I'm up this morning because Marty and I are about to pre-record a metallurgy episode with a collector friend of mine over in Sweden that will be airing on heavy metallurgy probably in early June. Our May calendar's pretty full already. And in between this morning, I wanted to do a quick response video to Melanie Loves Death Metal. Marty mentioned last night that, yeah, she had done a sort of, challenge calling for replies from folks to her most recent video where she picked two tapes, two CDs, two pieces of vinyl, and two pieces of memorabilia that are, kind of special, like sentimental value, things that a person would never want to get rid of. Just because, not necessarily because they're your favorite all-time albums, but because there's something special about how you got them or things like that. There's some special connection with them. And yeah, she's asked for folks to make reply videos. She kind of called Marty and I and several other folks out by name. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's a cool topic and one I can put together pretty easily. Should definitely go watch Melanie's video. She shows some really, really cool stuff. Some very rare and obscure stuff too. So a lot of cool shows from her. Um, the things I picked for this are kind of eclectic, a bit random, but we'll work through them. And there's a story, of course, to go with each one. I'll start with the two pieces of memorabilia. The first one is a coffee mug with the Graven image logo on it, and the title from their EP, People in Hell Want Ice Water. It got reissued with, People in Hell Still Want Ice Water, which was kind of a cool name for the reissue. But yeah, the coffee mug. So what's with this? Years ago, I was watching one of Aaron, the Metal Theologian's videos. And he was doing, what Aaron always does, pulling out some different random records, talking about them, playing some clips. Yeah, and he was just like, very casually drinking out of this mug. And I, look, it's like that looks kind of like the Graven Image logo. So I like had to pause it, kind of, sit there and stare at it. I'm just like, holy crap, where do you get a Graven Image coffee mug? I'm like, had never heard of such a thing. Graven Image, very small band, didn't last all that long. Only did, like a couple of EPs and stuff. So I'm like, if anyone in the world would have a Graven Image coffee mug, yes, it would be Aaron. But I can't believe he has this. So I left some kind of goofy comment like, I'm not sure what records you showed. I'm just sitting here geeking out over your coffee mug because that's awesome. And lo and behold, it turned out he had an extra one. So he's like, dude, send me your address. And like, a week or so later, got a box with a Graven Image coffee mug in it from Aaron. He's like, yeah, I actually had an extra one. And he threw a couple of other goodies in the box too. So it was just like, holy crap. I assumed it was just some maybe custom thing he'd gotten made, or maybe it was something like the band had put on, Bandcamp once upon a time years ago. I mean, I had already poked around online. It was like, there's like no evidence of a place where you could buy this from the band or anything. So I didn't know how he had got it or where it came from. But yeah, basically when the band did some of their reissue stuff, they had released some merch stuff. And, Aaron had gotten, some copies to distribute and things like that. And ended up with an extra coffee mug and some other things. So yeah, this is freaking awesome. I will always keep it. And yes, I do drink from it sometimes, especially if I have something that goes in a coffee mug. Just not coffee though, because I am not a coffee person. But yeah, that was one of the really cool pieces of heavy metal merch that I picked to show for this. Item number two on the merch list is a really cool band shirt, one of my oldest and most favorite ones. It's an original shirt from Australia's Armored Angel, and this is a design from their Communion demo days from the very early 90s. It's not one I wear very often at all because, the image is pretty grisly. That is not something I can get away with teaching in or walking around in, the southeastern U.S. with. You're going to have a whole lot of people coming up wanting to introduce you to Jesus if they see you wearing a shirt like that. Some of them might want to introduce you to something else, and yeah, just don't need that kind of yeah, interaction going on. But yeah, so yeah, it's a piece of art they used it for a lot around the communion time. Um, it is two-sided, so yes, you have feast upon the carrion printed on the back of the shirt. And as I said, yeah, this is an original one. I have another original Armored Angel shirt from later in the band's career. And, they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Just love their stuff. Kind of a classic example of a band that's, kind of, great cult status, never really got a break to, push through to wider recognition. But yeah, I will buy just about, any older original stuff with Armored Angel on it that I don't already have. And I knew they had made at least one other shirt back in the day. And so I'd always kept an eye out for it. It's like, Armored Angel is one of those saved eBay searches I have and all that. And so one time, it would probably been around 2003, 2002, 2003, in that time frame. The shirt showed up on eBay. And so I was like, holy crap, that's the communion shirt. I had never seen it. I had only heard of it. Maybe I saw it like in a photo of the band or something if one of them was wearing it. But so like, that's the fucking shirt. That's the one I don't have. So yeah, had turned up in that auction. I kept an eye on it all week, and I was able to win the auction. Um, I don't remember the exact amount I paid for it. I want to say I paid around $30 for it, which I was absolutely fine giving that for the shirt. I don't recall seeing another example of it come up since then. Obviously, once you get something, you don't quite keep an eye out for it the same way you did when you were hunting it down. But yeah, I can't remember seeing another copy of the communion shirt with the original art on it coming up since then. So not an easy shirt to find. Kind of a rare one by one of my favorite bands, and I've essentially had one chance to buy it, and I was able to get it, and yep, I've held on to it ever since. All right, so those are the two pieces of merch. Next, let's do the two cassette tapes. Melanie's put me in a bit of a bind here because I am not a cassette person, but I do have a few old ones left over, and I've kept them around because they're kind of special. I have a boombox sitting over here on the side. I don't even know if the tape deck works on it, and I don't know if I'd be comfortable putting any of these tapes in it and trying to play them. None of them have been played in probably, 15, 20 years at this point. So it seems like there's a higher than average chance if I put them in and hit the play button, they're just going to get destroyed. But here are the two that I picked for this. This one I've mentioned from time to time. It's a demo tape by a band called Charlotte's Web. Um, the sort of gimmick here was the leader of the band was a lady named Charlotte Webb Swanson, and they were kind of a crossover style band in Northwest Ohio in the early 90s. They carried on into like the mid 90s, but they changed their name to Five Story Fall. The music style didn't change too much, but they did change their name. Um, the reason this was a big deal is I was living in Northwest Ohio in the early 90s, and Charlotte's Web was like the only heavy band around. When I'd moved up to that area to go to college, I was like, yay, we're kind of, getting out of small country southern town, going to a college campus, closer to big cities. There's going to be heavy metal bands and concerts and people and fans everywhere. And yeah, that did not work out whatsoever. There are a couple of cool record stores that were in town. I don't know if I saw maybe one or two heavy-ish bands play in like 4 years in that town. Not much of a scene whatsoever locally around there. But yeah, Charlotte's Web was like, the one band. And it's actually a pretty cool set of songs. Yeah, again, it's, a thrashy style, but, leaning into some other styles also. It's not just pure Bay Area thrash. There's a bit of a hardcore vibe to it and such. It's got a few little fun samples to it. There's a song about Jack the Ripper on here. There's one about, people just being dicks, about the way metal fans look, with some kind of fun, cool lyrics. But yeah, cool demo. I've never found this one online anywhere. They did make a second demo a year or two later called Skeletons of South Street. That one I've come across online. You can poke around and find that one to listen to, but I've never found this first demo anywhere. I'm looking at the J card here to see if we've got, uh, yeah. Wow, there's actually a lot of people pictured. One, two, three, four, five. They got like seven different people pictured for the lineup. But that's Charlotte. I met her just once. Some of the members ran like a small merch store in town. It did not last. They didn't have a good location. And like I said, there just wasn't a scene locally, so it was probably only open a couple of months. But I did duck in there to buy the second demo, and she was working there at the time, so got to chat with her for a few minutes. They had some other cool merch, but I was a broke college kid. I literally had $10, so I had enough to afford the demo tape for a few bucks and have a couple bucks left over. I couldn't afford anything else in the store. But yeah, I would love to get a digital copy of this sometime just to be able to play it more often and hear it. I just never have come across it. Hey, maybe it's been put on YouTube or something since the last time I Googled it. Don't know. I should take another pass and see if anyone's got it posted. All right, cassette tape number two, kind of along the same vein. It's by a band called Hemisphere. Um, just self-titled short album release. It's got 8 songs. As I remember, it's pretty short though, maybe 30 minutes or so. Hemisphere, this is not a heavy metal band. It's sort of just a pretty straightforward rock band, maybe a little hard rock. This one came out in 93. The deal with this is that it was recorded by some kids I grew up with. One at least, the drummer, and again, go to the band photo. The drummer is this kid over here. His name was Matt Steele. He's a couple years younger than me, but we rode the bus together, and he was one of those kids that got into drumming at a pretty young age. So like even like intermediate school age and stuff. He was already known, to do a lot of drumming. And so yeah, he ended up, getting some other kids, putting a band together, and they would have released this probably about the time they were seniors in high school, if it was 93. Maybe they were already out of high school by a year or so. I'm not sure. I don't know the other guys in the band whatsoever. And it wasn't like I was, best friends with Matt or anything. It was just, yeah, he was the kid. He was a kid on the bus. I mean, it was a small community, so everybody kind of knew everybody. And yeah, everybody knew, yeah, yeah, Matt's the kid who's, really into the drums. But yeah, it was always neat that they put out a tape. I had again already moved out of the area, but at some point I was back, visiting my folks, and went to there's like at the time there was one decent record store, one town over. It was open for a couple of years, but I was in there browsing around, and they had some copies of this up on the counter. And I kind of looked at it, I was like, oh, what's that? And talking with the lady behind the counter, she mentioned, oh yeah, that's such and such, and again, everybody knows her basically. She like names some of the people, like, oh, Matt Steele, yeah, okay, that's. I kind of remembered he had been putting a band together, and the name Hemisphere stuck. And I was like, oh, they actually got a tape recorded, and they did it locally. It's not like they went off to Winston-Salem or Charlotte or something. They actually found a recording studio locally to do it for them. Came out sounding fairly decent. And it was just kind of cool. It's the only time I'm aware of that any of the kids in my area got something recorded and put out as a tape. I also kind of liked the cover art. I mean, it's simple, but I thought it was kind of a cool design doing hemisphere, half the brain and the other half, just with, the branches and stuff. So yeah, another one that I'd love to get a digital copy of. I doubt a digital copy has ever been made of it, but hey, if anybody ever stumbles onto a link to it or a video of it, please give me a holler. Let me know that it is out there because I've never found it, but it's been a while since I looked also. But yeah, I mean, there were other kids in my area who, tinkered around on guitar and, a couple of them might try to jam here or there. I don't know of any of them ever even like, recording something in their basement or garage. And I don't think any of them even got to that stage. So it's kind of cool that one group of kids, in my area did. get something put out. Okay, so the tapes are done. Let's do vinyl next. Let's do this one first. This is something that Jurgen sent to me just as a VCLT a couple of years ago. It's a copy of the second Atlantean Codex album, The White Goddess, which is a fantastic album by one of my favorite bands. But Jurgen, being Jurgen, of course, was within 15-minute travel time of pretty much every cool heavy metal person, event, venue, or concert that's ever occurred. And he actually, got, the members of Codex to autograph it for me, which you can see, of course, clearly on the cover there. So that's just amazing. I have several copies of The White Goddess, but this will be the one that I always keep because it was super nice of him to, think of me, get that autographed, and send it over from Germany. Shipping costs from Europe are a real thing these days. But yeah, this was awesome, fantastic album, and having a copy from Jurgen that he took the time and trouble to get them to autograph it. Hey, thank you again, Jurgen. That's awesome and definitely deserves a place on this video. Next one, something that yeah, a lot of sentimental value that I will never get rid of is my first pressing copy of Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations. This is the copies that just had the white cover. Some have autographs, some don't. This one's got, one autograph there with Kimberly. And, this is the true original plain white label pressing, not the second pressing where the labels are printed and say like, Happy Face Music and have the track list and all. There is nothing here except a plain white cover and plain white labels added to one of the best albums from the new wave of British heavy metal. These, of course, have always been hard to track down. The way I stumbled into this copy, it was again kind of early mid 2000s, and one of the biggest heavy metal collectors on the planet, Jim Cranford, was slowly selling off his collection on eBay. He was listing like a handful of items every week for probably 3 or 4 years at least. He took his time and spaced it out. And, when his copy of Lightning to the Nations came up for sale, I really wanted it. Getting an original first press, was one of those just, grail items I always wanted. I had gotten two copies of the second press. I've got one. And then sometime around 2000, I won a copy that was supposed to be a first pressing on eBay. But when I received it, it turned out it was a second pressing. I worked it out with the guy, ended up keeping it because I got it for a good price. I traded it in some other really rare stuff. So it worked out, but still didn't have the first pressing. So Jim's copy came up. Jim got great prices for a lot of his records. He was well known, super nice guy. His stuff was in top condition for the most part. He was always very easy to deal with. So yeah, people were willing to pay kind of a premium to get stuff from his collection through his auctions. I really wanted this. So, I saved what money I could. I was working on my dissertation at the time, so yeah, money was a bit tight, but I had saved money. It's like, okay, I think I can afford to put in a decent bid for it. Kept an eye on it all week, and his auctions, if I remember right, they typically ended kind of middle of the day, maybe like 1 o'clock or something. But that morning, I checked on it, and the price had shot up a lot overnight. His copy, as I recall, it didn't have any signatures on the cover, but he had like a couple of like newspaper clippings from back in the day talking about it. Maybe they were advertisements or something from magazines. It had a couple of pieces of paper paraphernalia included in it. I was like, oh shit. By the time I saw it that morning, I want to say it was already like, $330, $340 or something. It's like, okay, well, crap, there goes that. So I was really bummed out 'cause I'd wanted to put in, I thought I could put in a competitive bid, and it turned out I was not going to be able to. So went about, my day, worked in the lab for a while. Somewhere around lunchtime, I was like, I still want to see what it finally sells for. And so, during my lunch break, I hopped back on eBay. And for whatever reason, instead of just like going to my saved, watch list items, I just typed Diamond Head Lightning Nations into the search bar. I don't know why I did it that way. There's no reason I should have. So I did it, and it pulled up, items for sale, and yep, there was Jim's copy. It hadn't gone up anymore, but it didn't matter. It was already out of my price range. But right under it, there was another copy listed. And I kind of looked at it, just like, that's weird. Is there literally another copy for sale at the same time? That doesn't seem right. I'm thinking it's a second press or a reissue or something. But I clicked on it and checked and looked at it. It's just like, this is another copy from a different seller. And it actually ends this afternoon as well. I'm like, holy crap, what are the odds of that? And this copy hadn't gotten many bids at this point. It was being sold by somebody in the UK. And it was these days on eBay, you see like all these giant, Seattle thrift store books kind of sellers where they sell 10 million items a week, and it's all this stuff supposedly coming through, charities and thrift shops. This person had, kind of a similar blurb in the item description that, you sell things, that come through this, charity, all proceeds, go to that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they had posted pictures and a good description of it, and just like that is actually the right thing. Yeah, I think I probably sent them a quick email, and they replied right away, kind of confirming with a few more details, and it's just like, okay, like I can't afford to bid on Jim's copy, but this copy's not getting much attention. Everybody's so focused on Jim's auctions ending today, maybe nobody will see this one. And so, yeah, Jim's copy, I don't think it went up a lot more before it sold. It might have gotten around 350 or a little higher. I don't remember exactly. It's been 20 or so years ago. But then again, it was 2 or 3 hours later, this other copy in the UK was going to sell. I kept an eye on it, hung around, made sure I knew what time it was going to end, hopped on eBay to bid on it, and this is it. So again, the differences were this one's in just as good a condition as Jim's copy, doesn't have the paper advertisements or newspaper clippings with it, but it did have one of the band signatures on the cover, whereas Jim's had none of the band signatures on the cover. And I got it for a fraction of the price of what Jim's copy went for. Again, people were paying a premium for Jim stuff, and fair enough. I understand why. But I got this one hundreds of dollars cheaper. Let's just say that. So, yeah, it was one of them I hunted for probably for over 10 years. Yeah, definitely over 10 years trying to get this first pressing of it, and finally did. And yeah, this one is not going anywhere. Okay, that means we got two CDs left to round this out. We've done two merch, two tapes, two vinyl. So I need two CDs to finish with. First CD I chose for this is a copy of Weakling, Dead as Dreams. Folks know what this is. Don't need a long preamble about it. One of the bands that really inspired the whole Cascadian black metal movement. A short-lived band in California, I believe the San Francisco area, if I'm remembering right. They very small print runs on this, and famously, at least one of the band members, refuses to have it reissued. Doesn't want to talk about the project or anything. They've of course been approached numerous times. Daniel Lake tried to talk to him about the band and the album when he did the U.S. black metal book, and the guy wrote a pretty pointed email back. I don't remember the exact wording, but it's basically like, yeah, ha ha ha, yeah, yay, another book and person wanting to talk about black metal. No, thank you. It's not going to happen anytime in the near future. So copies of this are very hard to find and sell for a lot. The vinyl copies get insanely expensive, but even the CDs are pricey. There are like three different pressings of it that were all done fairly close together. So it's not like there was one single run of them. There's slight differences in the matrix numbers and whatnot, but they're all a pain to get. It was another thing I'd had saved on eBay. Copy comes up, I don't know, maybe once every 6 months or so. If it's a buy it now, it always sells instantly. If it's an auction, it gets very expensive. So I never had been able to snag one. And a couple of years ago, chatting with Marty, he had gone record shopping, and he's like, "Hey, look what I picked up. Found it in the used bin." Now Marty, of course, already had this. I was just like, "Holy crap, you got that out of the used bin?" He's like, "Yeah, it's just a few bucks." He's like, I know it's worth a lot, so I picked it up. I'll probably flip it or something. She's like, well, how about you flip it, to me? I'll pay you a fair price for it because I don't have that. And he's like, oh, you don't have it? I was like, no, I've never been able to get a copy of it. So I was like, figure out what you want for it. And, yeah, I'll let you make some money on it for sure. I've got no problem giving you a decent price for that. And won't talk details, but let's just say Marty was very generous when yeah, he ended up sending this one my way. So yeah, the fact that finally was able to get a copy of it, and in a very cool way for Marty. Again, Marty could have been like, okay, sure, how about $100? Been like, okay, yep, I don't pay big money for CDs hardly ever, but I'd have given him $100 for this. It's hard to get a copy for less than that. Um, Marty did not want $100 for it. We'll just leave it at that. So yeah, another thank you to Marty once again for helping hook me up with the Weakling album finally. All right, our last item for the night, the second CD, is a used copy of Symphony X's Paradise Lost. But Alan, why are you showing this? What's special about that? It's not a particularly old album, not a particularly rare album. You don't see Symphony X CDs, all the time. A few of the older ones are getting a little tough to track down and a little pricier. So why this? Well, the reason this is special is, and this is something I've just gotten in the past, I think in March. So yeah, within the past couple of months, as of the time of this recording. The deal with this one is that I didn't pay for it. My little boy paid for it. For Christmas, he got me a gift certificate to one of the local record stores. He wanted to get me a record, but he didn't have any idea, of course, what record would Daddy want? I don't know. So, he talked to his mom. Mom's like, well, you could get him, a gift certificate instead. And I was like, oh, do they do this for record stores? She's like, I think they do. So she took him to the record store, and he went up and talked to the cat guy at the cash register himself, apparently. And explains like, I want a gift certificate for my daddy for Christmas. So he got me a $10 gift certificate with his own money. And that was my Christmas gift. And which was also really sweet. Very cool of him. He came up with the idea on his own, as I said. And, I told him, I was like, okay, I want to save that, and get something, that I really definitely want from the store. And of course, oddly enough, that particular store hit a little bit of a dry spell at the beginning of 2025. We'd stop in every few weeks, I'd flip through, and they just weren't getting any new stuff in whatsoever. Nobody was bringing in used stuff, and they didn't get many new releases. They'd have a little thing here or there, and be like, Daddy, do you get something? Like, well, I want to make sure I get something that I'm really looking for. I don't want to get some random $5 used Rush CD that I'm probably not going to like at the end of the day. It was from him, so I wanted to make sure I spent it on something kind of special. Then we went in there again a couple of months ago in March. Someone had brought in like, a few power metal CDs traded in. This was one of them. And it was one I'd been looking to pick up. I think I had a copy of this years and years ago and traded it or sold it or something. But yeah, I've been wanting to pick up a few of the Symphony X titles again. I was just like, oh, hey, cool. Uh, they've got that used. And yeah, that, with tax, that will be like, just about the right amount for his gift certificate. So that's why this one is special. It is the first record that my little boy has ever bought for me. And as such, it will stay on the shelf forever. So that is that. We've covered two cassettes, two albums, two CDs, and two pieces of heavy memorabilia that are kind of, special, sentimental, some of my favorite things, that I have in my collection. And now it's time. Let's talk metal in the comments down below. For those of you that have channels, definitely encourage you follow up on Melanie's video challenge. Make your own video and post it so folks can see what items you pick out. For those of you who don't have a YouTube channel, that's no problem. List some of your special items in the comments down below, either on my video or go over to Melanie's video and do it. It's her topic. Make sure she gets to find out as well what kind of things you would have on your list. Some of those really special items You don't have to do two from each format if you don't want, but hey, you can list a few things. The ones that are special for whatever reason that you would never let go of because they mean a whole lot to you. That's her topic. I think it's a really cool one. And yeah, so a shout out to Melanie for coming up with a cool idea. And I hope she gets a lot of responses to it. I'll get this one posted right away for Tuesday. But now I got to go get ready to eat lunch and then get ready to record another heavy metallurgy episode and then possibly pass out to exhaustion. But we'll get through it all. All right. Hope you've enjoyed this one. Until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.